All right, kids, are you ready to hear a story? Yeah.
Welcome to Witch Toast and Other Tales. This story is called The Tapestry of Elshiva. In ancient Israel, there was a woman called Elshiva. She was an advisor to the king and the most trusted of them all. The other royal counselors grew jealous of her influence, and so they conspired to bring about her downfall, but some among them were fearful. You see, there were many whispers about Elshiva, that strange sounds came from her tower, that strange smoke rose out of its chimney, that at certain times in the dead of night, a strange light shined out from its windows, that strange shadows descended from the sky and slipped into the tower window, or that they slipped out and flew away. Certainly it was true that Elshiva had a strange collection of objects in her tower quarters. Servants paid to spy reported as much: oddly shaped mirrors, tablets of stone, and 3 great brass bells that hung from the ceiling above a great loom of iron and black walnut. And perhaps it was coincidence, but ill fortune did seem to come upon her enemies with uncommon regularity, though never in a way which suggested foul play, much less her specific involvement. So the counselors were hesitant to move against her, fearful to be her open enemies, fearful of her wrath and vengeance. And so they decided it was not enough to see her stripped of power or banished. Elshiva would have to die. Through treachery and deception, the other advisors convinced the king that Elshiva had betrayed him. That night he ordered 10 of his men to go and kill her. But as they ascended the spiral staircase, they encountered her walking down. One of the guards instinctively pulled out his sword, warning her, and she bolted upstairs and down the hallway. The guards chased after her, and just before she got to the doorway to her tower, a guard shot her through the abdomen with an arrow. She staggered inside, then shut and bolted the door behind her. The guards started hacking through the door when there came the sound of bells from the other side, at first loud and clear, then fading. Not as if they had stopped ringing, but as if they were moving somehow into the distance. The guards finally got through the door and stepped inside. They searched every nook and cranny. Most of the furnishings were still there: the bed and the sofas, the table and chairs, the wall hangings. But the strange mirrors, the tablets of stone, the 3 brass bells, and the great loom of iron and black walnut. And of course, most importantly, Elshiva herself had disappeared. All they could find of her was a trail of blood that ended in a stone wall and 1 bloody handprint on the tapestry that hung there. A self-portrait, the Tapestry of Elshiva. Over the ensuing decades, the tapestry changed hands and locations many times as kingdoms rose and fell. Eventually, it was rolled up and placed in a clay jar, then stored in an underground chamber. The palace above it was destroyed in a great battle and left in ruin. In the underground chamber, the clay jar and the tapestry inside were buried, and there they remained for 2,000 years. Of course, eventually some people came digging. They found the ancient chamber, including the clay pot with the tapestry, and after changing hands a few more times, the Tapestry of Elshiva was purchased by a man named Barnabas and placed on the wall of his penthouse in Manhattan. Barnabas was young and rich with a love of fine things and himself, but after a couple of years he fell in love with a young woman and they had children together whom he also loved. They had many happy times. Their children grew up and left home, and then they had children of their own. Barnabas and his wife grew old, and one sad day, she died. Alone in his penthouse again, Barnabas grew older and less steady on his feet. And through it all, through the good times and the bad, the Tapestry of Elshiva hung there on the wall of the living room. One day, Barnabas tripped over the edge of the living room rug and fell. He tried to move, but his leg hurt terribly and he couldn't get up. His phone was too far away, so he had no choice but to lay there until the maid came. Fortunately, it was only about 20 minutes later. She called 911 and an ambulance took Barnabas to the hospital. After that, his doctor insisted he wear a medical alert necklace at all times, had a button, and when he pressed it, it called both the in-building doctor and an ambulance. A couple of years later, Barnabas had a heart attack. As he collapsed onto the floor, he had just enough wherewithal to reach up, press the emergency help button, and help did arrive soon thereafter. They raced him to the hospital, and eventually he made a full recovery and returned home. One night, not long thereafter, he awoke with a start. He could have sworn he heard bells. He got out of bed and went to the living room, but the noise had stopped. His eye caught the tapestry and he looked at it in the moonlight. Was it just his imagination? Had her smile always been that large? Had her eyes always sparkled so? He thought of all that the tapestry had seen, of his wife and children and their happy times together, and smiled back and got into bed. And when he got back into bed, Barnabas had strange dreams. He was walking in a dense fog, lost and confused, when a hand took his own. He turned in alarm, but it was an attractive woman with a warm smile. She led him out of the fog to a sandy beach. The fog lifted, and the sunlight sparkled on the waves, and he heard the distant sound of bells. Even when he woke, their tolling seemed to linger in his ears. For a while he lay there and listened, but heard nothing. Night after night he had the same dream. It became a source of comfort to him. He supposed they were a product of his loneliness. Then one night he had the dream again. But this time, when he woke, he was nearly certain he heard the sound of bells, just for an instant in the space between dream and sleep. Then he heard them again. The living room. Heart racing, he climbed out of bed as fast as he could, grabbed his cane, and made his way into the living room. His eyes searched around for something, anything that could have made the noise. The bells sounded again. Could that be right? Could they be coming from the tapestry? He got closer. What was that there near the bottom? A handprint had appeared. The bells sounded again, and now he knew for certain they were coming from the tapestry. It shook and rippled with each toll. He looked at the face of the woman depicted there, and her smile was broad, warm, and friendly, just like in his dream. He could not help but smile. He reached up, just as she had always reached out for his hand, and pressed his hand against the handprint. It was warm and sticky. He went to pull his hand away, but it was stuck. He pulled harder. His hand came a little bit away, but there were tiny threads attached all over it. He panicked and pulled with all his strength, but he was old and frail. His hand snapped back to the tapestry, and then, to his horror, began to be sucked inside of it. As his hand went in, another hand came out, a long and slender hand, a woman's hand, a hand he had held many times before, but only in his dreams. His arm was in up to the shoulder now, and he was fighting to keep his head and face away from the painting, screaming, "Help! Help!" He reached up with his free hand to press the emergency alert button around his neck, but the woman's hand had already lifted it off his head. Barnabas turned as he was sucked into the tapestry and saw a woman in strange clothes with a bloody hand collapsing to the floor, frantically pressing the alert button. She had an arrow through her abdomen. First responders burst through the door a minute later and rushed to her side. Barnabas shouted and screamed. They did not hear. He waved his arms frantically. They did not see. Elshiva was loaded on a stretcher and rushed out of the room. An empty room. And there on the wall hung the tapestry of Barnabas. The end.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe.